Our white brothers and sisters often say that they can't understand racism.
Yeah.
Can you consider any ideas to have better understanding of others' experiences of race?
And that's a hard question.
It is a hard question. It really is, and I can't wait to hear what you're going to say. I want to tell you what I want to tell you what I think.
Once again, that's another case of education, and that's going down to the school systems. That's going down to the media as well, and how we portray black and white actual narratives and so forth. I get it. I actually do understand it because, as I said before, I think in my previous interview, when you're black and you're white and you're living in the same kind of environment, there ain't no differences because we still have the same problems. We still have the same, how can I say, objections to us advancing and moving forward. But unfortunately for white children, they will look at the black child and not see any problems or issues because our problems are a lot more than that. It's not just about economic issues with us. You see what I'm saying? But like, it's such a hard question, that one. You know, I just feel that it just boils down once again just to education.
So you saying that you don't think they can really understand it?
I don't think they will be able to understand it because because they don't have to. They don't have to understand it. It's not obligated to them for them to understand the plight of a black child. You know, that's not their issues here. You know, they just look at it as this is life. This is how we do. We crack on to the best of what we can.
But shouldn't they? Yeah, but shouldn't they be thinking in their mind, how the hell did this system come to be that black people are talking about the fact that there's inequality?
Well, that's the point.
Shouldn't that be something that's rattling around in their brains going, you know what, this is really odd. How can this doesn't make any sense. Where did black people come from? How can I possibly believe that black people have just kind of turned up out of nowhere, having been slaves, and all of a sudden these people, clearly we know they were in Africa, clearly we know that's where the world started, and we're like supposed to assume that they're not equal to us? How did it happen? It must be something that went wrong.
You'll find a lot of
white middle class
that are sympathisers because they think exactly that. When you're working class, you ain't got time to think about that.
Of course.
You see what I'm saying here? So, you don't need to think about those things because the most issues that I had with the whole Black Lives Matter was people from my background giving their views and very kind of disturbing views towards it. More making excuses about it. More a case of, well, you know what, it doesn't really bother us. Yeah, I want to understand why you're all protesting Black Lives Matter. What the hell's wrong with you? Do you know? And then we'll talk about Nazis and stuff like that and make comparisons. And you know what? It's easy for me to get on my high horse and, start getting into a Martin Luther King speeches, but it's all down to do with the actual channeling once again. White working class kids won't understand because they don't have to.
Well, if they're given education,
and that's the problem.
If you're saying education is the key.
Education's the only key, but if we do that, then a lot of lies with the education system will come and be too exposed. And does England, Britain really want that? I don't know.
That sounds like a conspiracy theory to me now.
No, but it's true though. There is. Because, as I said to you before, when you read stories, when I was reading stories when I was younger, I always used black and deemed it as evil, dark, mysterious. But when you actually put that towards myself as a person and say, you're black, then it's the views and ideas that you have of yourself is now a case of I've got to show that I'm not. Or I've got to, I'm not having it, And that's the problem, you see, we're always stepping one step back. And unfortunately what you'll find for a lot of white children from working class backgrounds is that they are channeled in a sense of where they look at us as excuses towards their problems, So the reasons why we live on an estate and we're not working is due to the fact that we've got all these immigrants coming over and taking our jobs. That's the That's the typical
that's
line that you have.
No, that's the way you read it in there.
And there you have that barricade. Then you have that divide. You know, when you have somebody that's educated,
such a divide and conquer. You know, leave them fighting amongst themselves rather than actually dealing with the real issues.
Exactly that. And you'll find with a lot of middle class.
God, how dare you drink my tea without complimenting me on it?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Just to say to everybody,
let's see the word. Let's see the name. Diamond Geezer.
Diamond Geezer. Just to say, my guy makes a cracking cup of chai.
My niece got me that.
Is
my
it?
niece got me that. Yeah,
I like it. Definitely. Yeah.
Thank you.
So it's such a hard question. It really, really is. But once again, it just goes down to channeling and education. And unfortunately, for a lot of working class children, they're not going to understand due to the environmental and social economics that they're actually in. And that's the fact.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And so once again, anyone, if you have anything to say, you want to put your views forward,
not unless they go that step further themselves and do it themselves. Well, yeah.
Yeah, for me, I think it was. What was my thoughts on that? I just felt, they were. All I'd want for them to do, to be honest, is just to listen. Just listen and understand. If, for example, if you see someone in distress, see someone having a problem, when people talk about racism, it's not to sit there and judge and say, oh, flipping, it's bloody, we talk about using the race card.
Here we go again.
Using the race card, use this one, he's a victim again. It's like, it's more about, look, why is he saying it? What's going on here? There might be some truth to what he's saying. There's no smoke without fire. And so in most cases, some people say, well, there's not, some people just say there's smoke, and there isn't any. Yeah. But the reality is, in this case, there's no smoke without fire. People don't necessarily put a hand up and say, look, mate, I'm a victim, unless they feel like they are one.
Yeah.
So you just got to investigate a bit further, not just, be so disparaging of those people. And that's one of the concerns I feel could really change.
That can change, definitely.
You can change things, If I come home, if I go and I feel like I've been stopped by a police officer and it was unfair, and I tell my wife, come on, I wanted to hear me and listen to me. And they say to me, well, maybe it's because you're driving really right. No, just hear me first and what I've got to say. Yeah. And then we'll talk about whether I was driving and causing problems.
I must say one thing though. I had one friend of mine that was on my Facebook, and she doesn't come from an area of where black and white people mix. So obviously her understanding of black people is very, I wouldn't say negative, because obviously she's still, I still mix with her and so forth. But it's, it's very much a case of, they're in an issue and they've got problems, and the problems they have is not our concerns and so forth. But she messaged me and said to me, I don't understand this. Could you show me where I could research and find out more for myself? And to me, that's the most educated actual response that I've had from somebody. To actually say, look, I don't understand this. This Black Lives Matter thing, I'm scared of, which most people don't admit to, because a lot of people think this Black Lives Matter is some terrorist group that's out to kill out all white people, which is not the case at all. And for her to come out herself and say that, I had to just put a round of applause and say, that's brilliant. So once again, she's doing exactly what you said there. Obviously it's about empathising, but I said before, it's ego over empathy in the periods of life that we're living in at the moment.
Absolutely. I'm glad that I'm just so glad that we can highlight some of these things that people are tripping up over.
Yeah.
It really is literally having somebody who's willing to talk and listen to create the change. If everyone's on their own, if you're on the left and you're right, you don't want to go anywhere else. You can't. There's no changes.
The problem. There's no conversation.
It's and we've seen it. We've seen it. That's war. That's the First World War. That's the Second World War.
Yeah.
That's when the person pushes that button for the Third World War. That is literally it. I'm not listening anymore. I'm pressing the button. Thank God people are listening. To each other. It's diplomacy.
Yeah, and that's what's needed more than anything.
Absolutely. But anyway, I want to go on to this question about police.
Yeah.
We have more BAME police officers than ever.
Yeah.
Will this change the distrust black people have for police overall? Because this is like a question that should be asked in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s.
We should have been asking.
Come on, we're still 2020. this is the worst year ever. But 2020, we're still talking about these issues.
Well, if you asked me this question, let's say about 10 years back, I would be so negative about it. I really would. I'd be like, of course not. They're still fighting. They're still fighting for the same system that oppresses us, and not being funny. When you did actually find that one black police officer, it would always be a case of a bloody Judas. Do you know what I mean? Sell out, whatever, coconut, whatever you want to call him. But now that I think about it, I think it's needed. It's always has been, but now it's imperative that we have more black, Asian, and people of different ethnic minorities coming into the.
But will we still have the trust though?
Will we have the trust?
Don't forget, because they're black,
maybe
that doesn't mean we trust them because they're black police officers.
Maybe not our generation, but we've got to look at our kids and so forth and the future of our children. And I think with that, it could happen. It could definitely happen. Maybe not with us because we've been through so much, but. I don't want to make out like it's a token gesture, because I don't think it is, because it's needed. It really is needed.
What's needed?
It's needed that we have more people from the same environments that they're policing to actually be policemen. Do you know what I'm saying? That's what's needed more than anything. Because if you don't have any understanding and you're just given the rule book, so to speak, and also as well in regards to how you deal, or you're supposed to deal with, let's say for people coming from, I don't want to put any colour codes here, but any kids coming from, like poor backgrounds or adults or whatever, or the way that they criminalise as well and label, it's a great thing that, that we're going to have people that understand it and can think for themselves and have that logic for themselves because they understand it. Rather than being the how can I say, the law book.
They understand the mindset of the youth.
And understanding that mindset, which
and
is
it's
really,
trust as well.
really,
it's trust. It's very much trust within the community. If someone who's, for example, in an Asian community, who's going to be able to speak to someone, from a Bangladesh group or community, should I say? Like if you got like in the East End, you have to have the right people to talk to them, whether it's interpreters or whatever. But the fact is, they need the right people to understand what's going on.
Exactly.
Otherwise, come on, it's just that's important. And I think that wasn't it introduced after the Daniela Taylor death that that happened. He was murdered.
Yeah, gradually there was steps. I think there was other.
Stephen Lawrence was the first thing, the Macpherson inquiry, and then after that, then you had Daniela Taylor, which died, and they started realising that we had to find ways to get to speak to the communities directly to make those changes.
But unfortunately, they're going to have their prejudices. They will. So when they're dealing with certain ethnic minorities, they will treat them a certain way due to the fact of how they're conveyed in regards to, as I said before, the media and everything else. So if you don't have any actual contact or affiliation or anything like that, you'll treat them in the way of what you've been told. When you do actually live in that environment or have come from that environment and you understand, then therefore, as you said quite rightly, it's going to build that trust. And maybe not so much for our generation because we've been through too much, but I would say definitely going forward and with the new generation coming now, it's imperative that we do have that.
Great. Do you know what I'd say as well? Is that it might bring trust between the different cultures and different groups and different communities that they're policing. But at the end of the day, what kind of trust does it bring between the actual police force itself if you know that you can't go into those areas? If you're a white police officer, you can't go into a black community to talk to them because they don't trust you. Then the black police, they think they can't go into a white community to trust. Isn't that creating more division though?
Definitely creating more division. I would say definitely that creates division, but that's what they've been doing for so long, haven't they? But that's the token black police officer coming in and the token white person coming in. This is what the whole change is about now. If we have a multicultural actual police force, and I mean multicultural police force, then it's going to be not a case of, here comes that black policeman token. It's going to be a case of, all right, let's see what he's got to say. Let's see what's happening here, because that's the only way I'd say, in regards to the police force being able to protect us, what they're supposed to be doing. I'd
love to imagine that we get to a point where black youths, whatever, white youths, will be just as comfortable being spoken to or having someone from another community dealing with them.
Yeah.
That's where I like it has to be.
That's what I'm trying to say here, you know? We won't have that if we have a multicultural police force. So no one.
We won't have that.
No, we won't have. So we won't have that concept of, well, a black policeman speaking to a white guy and reverse rate round and having your backup immediately before that policeman started, because you understand the concepts of what you feel is the police force and they're racist and they're this or they're that. Do you know what I mean? When you have a multicultural police force itself doing their job professionally, then I don't think we're going to have so many issues, you know? And unfortunately, growing up, you know, it was ridiculous with the police force. You know, as soon as you see police, it was a case of my back was up immediately, even if I hadn't done anything. Suddenly I felt like I had to change the way that I speak. Suddenly I felt a bit, you know, oh God, here they come. They're going to try and nick me.
But but as a police officer, isn't that their job to kind of gain some form of respect and, you know, to have people feel differently about it? Aren't they there to weed out the criminals, to protect the people? You know? So it's a really difficult job. I think it's an incredibly difficult job to try to be this, you know, this person who's being this.
Too much work, I feel.
Yeah, it's a very difficult job.
They're social workers. Do you know what I mean? They're marriage guidance counsellors. Do you know what I mean? The police do a hell of a lot of work, which they really shouldn't have to be able to do. They should be able to serve and protect. And I think, unfortunately, with so many kind of children's play centres and so forth, which have been debunked completely, it gives the policemen a lot more of a harder job to do. You know? Well,
I think, hopefully they'll work it out. And guys, if you have any ideas and you think what we're talking about is making sense and you've anything, suggestions put forward, who knows, someone from the police force might even see this and might want to hear, might listen to this and think, no, actually this is interesting and I want to follow this and follow this thread. So thank you so much.